Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, December 22nd, 2025. Scott Ritter will be with us in just a moment on the EU silencing and stealing from Colonel Jacques Baud. But first this. History tells us every market eventually falls. Currencies collapse. And look at where we are now. 38 trillion in national debt. Stocks at record highs defying gravity. So what happens next? Groceries, gas, housing, everything's going up. And this dollar, it buys less every day. When the system breaks, your stocks won't save you and your dollars won't either. But one thing will: gold. I've said it on my show for years. Gold survives collapse. Central bankers know this and billionaires know it. That's why they're buying more. Is it too late to buy or is it just the right time? Call my friends at Lear Capital to find out. Ask questions, get the free information. There's no pressure, and that's why I buy my gold and silver from Lear. And right now, you can get up to $20,000 in bonus metals with a qualified purchase. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com today. Scott Ritter, welcome here, my dear friend. Thank you for accommodating my schedule. The short week for all of us because of Christmas on Thursday. Before we get to the EU and Colonel Baud and the significance of what happened to him without any due process, I want to ask you a few questions about China, because in the past 2 weeks, the following occurred. The Trump administration's national security strategy came out and referred to China as not an enemy, but an economic competitor. Good, probably true. The National Defense Authorization Act came out, which gives the Pentagon more than $1 trillion. And in that is $11 billion to Taiwan for offensive weaponry. And the United States seized last weekend a Venezuelan oil tanker destined to go through the Panama Canal and make its way to China. Do the Trump people know what they're doing?
No. I mean, I hate to be this blunt, but if you take a look at the people that they've staffed the national security positions with, in the past, we used to get, when we talked about Russia, we got Russophobes. I mean, people who actually hated Russia, a visceral hatred. Fiona Hill, she has no love for Russia. Christopher Ford, who negotiated arms control, he hates Russia and hates arms control, and yet he was the man responsible for negotiating arms control with Russia, which is why he ended up killing the INF Treaty. Today on China, we don't have Chinese experts. We have people who hate China. And sometimes their hatred just comes down to it's the Communist Party. Therefore, they are evil. They don't know anything about China. They don't know anything about Chinese policy. To them, simply, doing anything that can constrain the dragon is a good thing without any notion of what the consequences of their actions will be. The document may say they view China as an economic competitor, but the reality is if you treat China as an adversary, the rest of that document says, for instance, that the United States will be seeking conventional military overmatch in the Pacific. That means that we have said we are going to dominate China with conventional military power as a way of deterring any potential Chinese strike against Taiwan. Oh, by the way, we're giving $11 billion to Taiwan for weapons that are capable of offensive operations against China, even though we ostensibly endorse a one China policy linked to a decision by the United Nations that said China controls everything, including Taiwan. We simply don't know what we do. We don't know what we stand for. We don't know what our policies are. And it's going to come back to haunt us because the Chinese are ready. The Chinese are prepared, and the Chinese aren't afraid of us.
Isn't this military overmatch U.S. to China an impossibility?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, again, first of all, it's the Pacific. So you need boats, you need ships. The Chinese, punch out hundreds of ships a year. I think over 400. We don't come anywhere near that number. We're talking, on our submarine production, in order to maintain the status quo of existing submarine frames, we have to produce somewhere around 2.5 submarines a year. We're producing 1.7. And it's the same with our other, the keels that we lay for other ships. We just don't produce ships in the quantities or in the quality necessary to compete with China. One of the reasons why we got out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019 was because we feared Chinese overmatch in terms of intermediate nuclear forces, intermediate range missiles, 500 to 5,500 miles. And we were supposed to match them with the Dark Eagle. Well, the Dark Eagle isn't operational yet. It may be operational. We don't know. But even if it does become operational, when you look at it, it's a whole bunch of money to produce a missile at a rate of 1 per month that doesn't do very much damage. It's not a nuclear capable missile. So we've spent all this money. We've just destroyed arms control, destroyed global stability, so that we can say, look, we have an intermediate range missile now we can deploy against China. It's not as powerful as a cruise missile, a conventional cruise missile. When we took out the Taji missile production facility during Desert Storm, we hit Taji with, over 100 individual cruise missile points. It would take 100 months to produce 100 Dark Eagles, and they couldn't do the damage that was done. This is how stupid we are. We are nowhere close to having conventional overmatch for the Chinese. The Chinese outclass us in every way, shape, and form when it comes to projecting power into the immediate region that they live in. China's not a world power like we are. They don't project, blue water navies halfway around the world. But China's very good at projecting power into the waters off of China, into the first island chain and stuff. They have unmatched conventional power, and we're not ever going to get near them. And so this is a bad strategy. We're going to just waste a lot of money, a lot of time to eventually realize, as we are with the Russians, that when we sit down with the Chinese, we actually have to take their legitimate national security interests into account. And sometimes that means that we have to back off of things that just don't make any sense. Just like we have to back off of Ukraine, we're going to have to back off of Taiwan pretty soon. Because
so we're putting missiles in Taiwan. We all know from history, although I was alive when it happened, when Russia put missiles in Havana, suppose Beijing puts missiles in Havana. Does the Trump administration expect that it would sit back and do nothing?
No. First of all, the missiles we're putting into Taiwan aren't strategic in nature. And the Chinese have the ability to take these out. That's the frustrating thing about this, is that we're spending $11 billion on giving Taiwan a capability that simply turns it into a target. Because all the Chinese are going to do is locate where all this material goes and then target it with, one of the thousands of ballistic missiles they possess that Taiwan will never be able to reach. Taiwan will cease to exist as a civilization, as a nation state, as a place capable of sustaining life before a single Chinese soldier sets foot on their soil. This is the reality. And it will happen instantaneously, so fast that the United States won't be able to mobilize. We don't even have a war plan for Taiwan now, because we're not allowed to have a war plan for Taiwan, because Taiwan doesn't really exist. It's not a sovereign state. So what we have is a modification of our war plan for Korea. But that war plan for Korea, to get 700 to 900,000 troops to Korea, takes months, if not years, in the total effort of the United States. We don't have those troops anymore. All the troops that are earmarked for that plan are doing other things. We don't have the ability to back up our rhetoric on Taiwan with anything other than nuclear weapons. And therein lies the rub, because the stupidity that we're getting ourselves into pushes us down a path that can only lead to nuclear confrontation. And when that happens, we all die. And, so it's a policy of suicide as opposed to a policy promoting, national security.
I want to move on to Russia, but I got to tell you, this crazy comment that you paraphrased, China's dangerous because they're communists. Well, I've heard this from Senator Tom Cotton, who's a graduate of Harvard Law School and sits in the United States Senate and whispers into the president's ear.
Yep, and you hear it from Driscoll, the U.S. Army Secretary, who's apparently the coolest thing since sliced bread.
Oh, he's the heir apparent to
Hegseth,
Hegseth when they realize that the Hegseth has been murdering people.
Well, and if you think Driscoll's going to do better, don't.
No.
He may not be the push-up and pull-up fanatic that Hegseth is, but his brain works just as well, which means it doesn't work at all.
What do you think Witkoff, Kushner, and Kirill Dmitriev are talking about? They can't be talking about whether Ukraine should be in NATO. That is non-negotiable. They can't be talking about whether Ukraine would be neutral and its military forces would be below 100,000. That's non-negotiable. They can't talk about the land of Russian-speaking people's return to Russia. That's not negotiable. What are they negotiating?
Look, I think the Trump administration has its eye on the post-conflict reality, meaning that they accept the fact that Ukraine and Europe are not going to allow this negotiation to go through. They'll go through the motions. They'll listen so they can't be accused of not listening, and they'll take the message to Dmitriev and to Ushakov and to Putin when they meet with him. And then the Russians will say the same thing, just what you did. No, 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 no. But we got $1 trillion possibility in terms of the exploitation of the North Arctic's wealth. We've got another $1 trillion possibility in rare earth minerals. Man, when we finally get this thing going, it's going to be good for both of us, and that's what they're talking about. The other stuff is just show. You can talk all you want about security guarantees, but if there's not a nation left to guarantee the security of, it doesn't matter. And the way Ukraine's going right now, there's not going to be a Ukraine left by the time this is all said and done. They just assassinated a lieutenant general in downtown Moscow. It's an act of terrorism. And if you don't understand the Russians, and because the Russians aren't going to panic and do what America would do, lock the whole country down and shut down every airport and frisk every dog. The Russians will just get on with their business and do what they do. But they're writing down names. I mean, Budanov's a dead man. He's the head of the intelligence service that carried this out. If he doesn't understand it, he has zero life expectancy. He will not survive this conflict. And everybody with him will also pay the ultimate price. The Ukrainian leadership is a terrorist organization. The Russians identify them as such. And so they're sitting there negotiating a future none of them will have a chance to enjoy, because they're all literally dead men walking.
The Wall Street Journal reports that Trump is about to propose a high-tech Gaza, that Gaza will be turned into some sort of a glamorous high-tech facility, and they're soon going to be looking for investors. Alistair Crook says that there is no such thing as the Gaza ceasefire. Trump has lost control over Netanyahu, and when Gaza collapses, Netanyahu is going to blame Trump. How do you view all this?
First of all, it's pie in the sky. If Gaza was stable today, turning Trump's vision into reality is something that would have a timeline that goes well beyond Trump's remaining 3 years in power. He doesn't have another term. And, it's questionable whether or not he's going to be able to do anything after November anyways. If he continues with these policies, there's a good chance that the Democrats will do well in the midterm elections and seize control of at least one house of Congress, probably the House of Representatives, and then it's back to paralysis. They will simply move to impeach this man over and over and over again, and he will be tied up, tied down, nothing he can do. End of his presidency, and in doing so, destroys the possibility of somebody from cut from the same piece of ideological cloth continuing these policies. So things like the Gaza technological miracle it'll never get off of paper, even if things were going well, and things aren't going well. There is no ceasefire. Hamas has not been defeated. Israel is not prevailing. And this is going to go south. And Netanyahu is a politician. He will seek to blame everybody but himself for this. It's a disaster, but we're not allowed to talk about it, you see, because Trump got the FIFA, peace award.
Oh, right. He got a peace award from the International Soccer Organization, right?
Oh yeah, but it was a peace award. I mean, and come on, this is Donald Trump. He renamed the JFK Center because he's Donald Trump. It's now the Trump Kennedy Center because Donald Trump is a cult of personality, and that's where we're at right now. We have a literal cult of personality where you're not allowed to say anything that denigrates or puts down, this larger than life character that now occupies the White House.
Wait a minute. The Russia-phobes in the State Department and the American deep state have always said that Russia has a cult of personality around Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is just the world turned upside down, Scotty.
Yesterday, I think, was Joseph Stalin's birthday, 147 years old. But there's a poster out there that said, yes, there was a cult, but there was also personality, meaning that, and so yeah, you can say, if you want to say about Putin, there's a cult of personality, yeah, but there's a personality. There was a man who just the other day spent 4.5 hours answering questions from everybody, and he didn't fumble once. A cult of personality, though, is more emphasis on the cult. And that's what we have here in the United States. I'm not saying, I mean, everybody who I've spoken to who's actually knows Donald Trump says he's a very personable man. He's actually, he's the kind of guy that you could get along with. He's nice. He cares about you when you're in and all that. So I'm not here to say that he's the personification of evil, but he is a narcissist, a supreme narcissist. And
yes,
he likes the idea of this cult of personality and he encourages it. And unfortunately, he's surrounded himself with weak people who are not able to just tell him, say, no, boss, that ain't going to happen. You're setting yourself up for failure. See, he can do no wrong. He says things and he can do no wrong. He's sort of the American equivalent of Kim Jong-un, who apparently when he learned how to play golf, went out and played 18 holes and got 18 holes and won because he's Kim Jong-un.
What is the future of America's relationship to Europe? I mean, shouldn't NATO be disbanded? Shouldn't we get the hell out of NATO? And what do we care about the EU? It's hopeless.
Well, I personally believe the European Union is on the path towards irrelevance, and you will see Europe redefine itself as a collective of sovereign states instead of subordinate nations to this imaginary being called the European Union. NATO, likewise, is an unsustainable organization. I think that the collapse will come sooner than later and be directly linked to what happens in Ukraine. NATO cannot survive. People tend to forget that NATO had been dealt a fatal blow by Afghanistan and what the United States did to NATO in Afghanistan. We abandoned NATO. Nobody talks about that, how when Trump made the decision and Biden made the decision to get out, they just left the United States went around to Europe and did the old tin cup routine saying, raise money to keep your things going. Raise money. Oh yeah, we're out of here. Good luck. And that was a humiliation for NATO. And this is one of the reasons why they immediately turned their eyes on Russia to define Russia as this existential threat. Because if they hadn't, and NATO started talking about the reality of the diseased relationship between the United States and Europe, the United States and NATO, which existed even back then, the organization couldn't survive. So they manufactured a conflict in Ukraine with Russia to justify their continuing existence. But now they've literally gone all in on a losing hand. They're not going to win this. And when Ukraine collapses, that's literally the end of NATO. It will not survive the collapse of Ukraine.
I'm intrigued by the EU silencing this retired Swiss military intelligence officer, Colonel Jacques Baud. What can you tell us about this? They silenced him, meaning he's not allowed to speak out. He can't travel. They have seized his assets and his bank accounts, and we are told he has no judicial recourse to the seizure. How can that possibly be?
Well, because Europe is a dictatorship. I mean, it's a police state in every way, shape, and form. First of all, that which they have accused him of being a Russian asset, of parroting Russian position, it's just an outright lie. One of the things that made Jacques Baud what he was the fact that he used Western research to make the points that he made. It's just that the conclusions he's reached were uncomfortable for people who were not paying attention to the facts. But this man didn't travel to Russia. This man didn't appear on Russian media outlets. He didn't, meet with Russian officials to get the Russian perspective. He simply delved into Western data to point out the vacuous nature and reality of Western policy, which made him in many ways more dangerous than people like me, who extensively draw upon Russianary expertise and the Russian perspective. He draws upon the West exclusively, and the conclusions he reached are unimpeachable. And therefore, the only way they could deal with this man is to silence him in the most, the only other thing that would be worse than this is actually imprisoning him and killing him. But they have literally sought to deplatform him, delegitimize him, and to destroy him economically. If the Swiss government doesn't do something about this, then let me put it this way. I've just published a book, and it's been put out in Spanish and German and some other European languages as well. And I was supposed to go to Spain and Germany and maybe some other places in March. And when Jacques Baud, when this happened, I received sound legal advice not to go anywhere near Europe right now. I definitely will never go to the United Kingdom. I would be arrested on the spot. They would treat me more harshly than they treated George Galloway. And now the notion of me traveling to Europe, I used to go to a Swiss conference every year. Wonderful group of people. I'm not going to Switzerland now, not because they're doing nothing about Jacques Baud. And if they're going to treat one of their own, a national resource, a national hero like this, what would they do to an American who has been singled out by the European Union, by the Ukraine? The Ukrainians have singled me out for death. I got a bomb threat in the mail the other day. The post service isn't taking it seriously, but I do. This is the world we live in right now. And Americans need to understand that this freedom of speech issue. A lot of people are like, why does J.D. Vance, stick his nose in Europe's business? Because freedom of speech is absolute and universal. And when you start silencing people anywhere in the world, it resonates globally, especially when you silence a voice of reason, an intelligent voice, a fact-based voice, a voice that has been proven factually correct across the board. It means you're silencing the truth. And when you silence the truth, what's that say about the quality of the life and existence that we collectively lead?
Last question. I know you've written extensively about this, but we have just a few minutes left. What is the significance of the Oreshnik?
The Oreshnik is game, set, match. First of all, it's real. A lot of people are saying, well, it's just a bluff. It was an experimental missile. No, the Oreshnik now, there is a brigade, I believe. They used to deploy them in regiments. I think now that's a brigade, but it's still 3 battalions, 3 launchers, 9 missiles, operational. When I say operational, it just doesn't mean that you've married the missile up with the launcher. That actually took place back in August. When the first missile rolled off of the Votkins production facility and then was sent to Kapustin Yar, where it married up with the launcher that had been purpose-built back in March of this year. And they put the missile on, and then they trained the troops on, the technical parameters of the missile, how it operates, how it performs. And then they went through their combat drills. And so they did all of this, and now the unit has been brought up, and it's in Belarus in a facility that has been repurposed. It's a former SS-20 facility back in the INF days that was decommissioned. They brought it back. when I look at the photographs, they've put back the nuclear weapons technical handling area. So this is a brigade that has conventional and nuclear capacity. I believe it's probably a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning they got 3 nuclear armed Oreshniks and 6 conventionally armed Oreshniks. And the Russians are going to be doing similar things. The West has nothing that can come close to the capabilities of this system. And this system allows Russia the ability to do strategic escalation in a non-nuclear fashion, meaning that they can fire these missiles that can reach out and touch anywhere they want in Europe in response to provocations from the West without automatically triggering, a nuclear. So it gives Russia even more flexibility. Europe's got nothing that can match this. The missiles in serial production. That means that from August until December, they produced a brigade's worth of material. Okay, so that's August, September, October, November, December. They're going to have 2 or 3 brigades coming out a year, and they will do this for as long as it takes. And next thing you know, there's going to be 300 of these missiles, and there's nothing. We have the Dark Eagle, and as I already said about China, the Dark Eagle, if it's deployed to Germany, can do nothing. It's got this tiny little warhead. They don't even know if it works. They've spent so much time trying to get the Dark Eagle to actually leave the launcher and then fly like it's supposed to. It can go Mach 4 or Mach 5. The Oreshnik comes in at Mach 10 or 11, just to understand that. But in order to do this, they never focused on actually what the kinetic strike capacity is, what damage is done. They don't know if the warhead of the Dark Eagle can accomplish the military tasks that it's been assigned. That's our best. And they're going up against the Russians who have the Oreshnik. And now, the Russians are talking about Oreshnik 2.0. That's the next one. And they're talking about other systems, Oreshnik-like. They're going to be flooding the field with these new intermediate range missiles that give them conventional overmatch in Europe. When Putin says that he will destroy Europe, it's not necessarily through nuclear weapons. Russia's developing the capability to destroy Europe conventionally.
Wow. Scotty, we have to go. Christmas is upon us. I know you're doing some traveling, and we'll be off unless there's major developments that require we come on for 10 days, leading up to resuming on January 5th, which is 2 weeks from today. Maverick is happy that we'll be off. This year, Judging Freedom for the second year in a row exceeded 100 million views. You are the most popular guest on the program, and I can't, of course, thank you enough. We have become very good friends. We've traveled together. We've collaborated on projects. You're a great human being, and I value deeply our professional relationship and our personal friendship, and I thank you for it.
Well, I thank you very much. I share the same sentiment, and as good as this year was, and this is a pretty exciting year, I think next year is going to be even better. And hopefully it's better in terms of heading towards better outcomes. But I look forward to working with you in the year to come.
Thank you, Scott. All the best to you. Safe travels. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. A busy day tomorrow. I'm not even going to give you the times, but it's virtually every hour with the exception of 9 a.m. and noon. Ambassador Chaz Freeman, Pepe Escobar, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Aaron Mate, Matt Ho, Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski, Max Blumenthal. We'll see you tomorrow. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.